9 million acres of crop in California alone use 40% of the water supply. Only 10% goes to residential. I'm curious where the rest of the water supply goes. And then here's some specific California facts. Hundreds of species are at risk of extinction. There's 300 right now, a little bit less than 300 species that are at risk of extinction in California alone.
Dang.
Okay, so this is some good stuff too. I think I've talked to you a little bit about this, but in the last 200 years, let's take a look at redwoods, which are California classic, right? They only exist here, largest trees in the world. We can talk a little bit about native grasslands, riparian habitat, and just take a look at the waterways. So in the last 200 years, 95% of all redwoods gone in California. 99% of all native grasslands are gone. And those hold the highest biodiversity of plant life in California, by the way.
Wow.
Riparian habitat, this is areas that are wooded along waterways. 95% of riparian habitat is gone. And when it comes to waterways, 80% of all major rivers, 41% of smaller streams and rivers, and 36% of headways, all altered, dams, levees,
insane.
Things of that nature.
I love this state so much, and I'd literally give a limb if I could go and see California in its original state.
I would like to still be able to shoot a shotgun at some birds up in the air, so maybe a leg would be cool. I'd do it too.
I'd give a leg would be okay.
Leg, yeah.
It'd be a little difficult to get around.
There's stories of so many ducks flying into the air that the sky would go black.
Yeah.
It would become dark.
Grizzly bears.
Yep. That was less than 200 years ago. Those things existed in California.
Yeah.
Well, so I think what I'm kind of painting the picture here is farming in particular is a huge percentage of workers' compensation, right? The agricultural worker. And so I'm curious, as we identify these types of problems that are happening in farming.
It was 800,000 farm workers is what I researched.
You got 800 in the U.S.?
Yes.
Gotcha. And 162,000 of those are in California.
Okay.
Yeah. So with all of this
climate change,
environmental potential for catastrophe, what is the future of farming going to look like? And if it changes significantly, what is that going to do to the workers' compensation industry?
Yeah. And your theory is that it has to change significantly. It's going to change significantly.
Yeah, we're not going to have a choice. It's going to be
It's that or major natural disasters, which are...
Yeah, I think major natural disasters are going to happen regardless. Like that's not necessarily something that we can control at this point. But the way that we do farming now, if major disasters happened, it's going to have such a crazy ripple effect that would force people to say, okay, we need to do something different.
It's not necessarily that the farming is leading to natural disasters. The natural disaster is going to happen, and how is farming going to respond and or be prepared for that?
I think that, and I do think that farming itself is, helping with potential natural disasters.
Sure, contributing.
Yeah. Central Valley.
So give me some examples of how farming now makes us less prepared.
Like the water table in California has been collapsing. There's areas that you can go to where there's, in the last 20, 30 years have sunk like feet because the water table below is collapsing. And when we pull that much out of it, it doesn't have the ability to replenish like it once did either.
It doesn't absorb water like it did once as it did before.
Yeah.
You deplete it too bad.
So monocrops and like the way we do dense animal farming, those are the big problems, right?
I see.
And so what are the problems with monocrops? So we have supply chain issues. We have soil erosion and air quality. You ever heard of valley fever? Yeah, that's some pretty nasty stuff. We have a individual here that had a chance to go out to our Visalia location back in the day when we were out there, and she would come back and be fully covered in a rash from just being exposed to the air out there. Pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I have some nephews that have, unfortunately, they live down there and have some respiratory issues. I mean, little kids having respiratory issues.
Yeah.
Sad.
So pesticides and fertilizers,
Right.
Algae blooms in the ocean, honeybee collapse, even people like getting sprayed with these things, right?
Oh, geez.
Then we have
So that's all monocrop.
all monocrop. And then the water supply is a big problem with monocrop, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
And when we talk water supply, you can go even further. Fish populations damaged by the dams used to irrigate the land, things like that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just all of this infrastructure that we've created. We've kind of outgrown it.
Or learned it, and then we can do better. No, we can do better now.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different possible solutions that we can move towards too. So if we go down a particular path with the solution, I guess the question is, how will people fit into that bill, and then how will that impact workers' compensation? I mean, already, even in the current system with monocrop farming, we already have like supply issues with people to keep those things running. So there's companies like John Deere that are going out and they're very specifically looking towards creating efficiencies in their machines, right? So in a way, it is improving the health of the environment. I went to Moline, Illinois, where the original founding of John Deere was created. They had a big old museum with these huge like Kanbans.
That sounds cool.
$1 million machines.
Combines,
yeah. And one of them had like 150-foot wingspan on these arms that came out from either side. And they had nozzles that sprayed pesticides, and each nozzle had a camera, and it's looking at the earth and it's detecting the weeds, and it's only doing direct application of pesticide on the weeds. So it doesn't kill anything else. They're not doing like blanket pesticides. And I talked to the worker there thinking like, oh, this is super awesome. John Deere's like big on the environment and all this type of stuff. And obviously he is a representative for the museum. So I'm not saying this is the John Deere stance, but this was what their individual is communicating, that the focus wasn't on the environment. And then instead it was about, how do I reduce cost for farmers?
Sure.
So I can use a lot less pesticide if I do it specifically. So I had a conversation with him for a while, and his focus is like, monocrop's not going away. This is where John Deere is, and this is what we're focusing on. Not to say that they couldn't pivot and move to a more, friendly way to do things. But that in itself, right? Like people used to probably go out with little weed sprayers and hit these things. And now they have machines, one guy in a car, driving. They had like a TV screen in there. They had like a crazy sound system. The like it was a suspension air ride on the seat. It was the most comfortable seat I've ever sat in my life.
Yeah.
It was amazing. These guys are dialed. But that's one individual, granted, probably making a pretty good amount of money driving $1 million machine. So if the future is that,
in general, so whether or not we go monocrop or we go away from monocrop, whether or not we do that or not, the reduction of human element within human labor within farming is happening.
Yeah. Right now, we have labor there that they can't even fill. I think it's something like for the past 5 years, there's a number, it was like 2019. So this is not even including COVID. 5 years before 2019, they were having a labor shortage of like 56%. Like Americans don't want to go do that work. And I was looking at some graphs, the percentage of, if you can get a little screenshot, the top is U.S. citizens. These are legal workers, and the blue is the undocumented. And it's still, they're at like 56% of like unfilled positions. Farmers are having difficulty. So they're going to think towards automation, I would imagine, before they start thinking local. But there are some small little pop-up shops that are doing new things.
Our takeaway is the labor required for ag, for farming, is going down one way or another.
It looks like that's going to be the case. So how is the work comp attorney going to respond? Have there been instances where work comp attorneys have had to deal with like the change of whole industries?
Probably a question for our audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing of note in the news was AB 2183 signed by the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an ag labor bill that allows now farm workers to be better organized and unionized. So that it allows them to unionize via mail.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of that was a big deal. There was hundreds of people that marched actually that recreated the march of Cesar Chavez from Delano to Sacramento.
Interesting.
Kind of cool. Yeah. And I came up with some similar numbers, the 70% undocumented, which was interesting. And then only 1% is unionized. That's by information from UC Merced. Yeah. On the other side of the issue, though, is this was a man from CalFresh Fruit Association reporting from the Fresno Bee that said he said that he doesn't think that they've seen mass unionization in California because California has done such a good job of creating a work environment for California agriculture employees. That's an interesting.
I wonder what the work comp attorneys that are representing the people getting sprayed by pesticide would say.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not. I think that this statement is probably broad based. It's not. There are situations, of course, where people are getting hurt and legitimately hurt for sure. But being unionized would maybe allow for better.
There's definitely a climate. If there's such a high percentage, it looks like over 2/3 of the workforce are immigrant or whether authorized or unauthorized.
Yeah.
And I know with the recent climate, there's a lot of people are scared essentially. So if they want to vote by mail, I think that kind of helps them out a little bit.
That was probably the argument. That was part of the argument for sure.
Can the unauthorized still be part of that voting?
Yeah, unrepresented.
Okay.
Undocumented.
Yeah, undocumented.
Yeah.
Okay,
for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think that will? I guess it'll just change the way that these unions work, and like the leadership at the top will be better represented by the people will be better represented if more can vote, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that that quote that I read is not off base. I mean, we live in the valley, right? So you see working improvements, working condition improvements with access to bathrooms and access to wash stations, which was not existent, 10 years ago. I actually have a friend that's a farmer that also he's very cares about his people and his employees, and
that's good.
So you hear the positives of how that's improving wage improvements, etc.
Awesome. Hopefully it goes quick.
Yeah,
continues on that path.
Sure. So that'll wrap up our discussion on this one. Again, we'd love to hear from our audience. Subscribe, like, follow, comment. We're excited to hear feedback and ideas on new topics. As always, Frank, it's been a pleasure.
Sweet. Thanks, Dan.